The moment I heard his voice drop to a whisper on the other side of that door, something cold moved through me. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling you get when you realize the ground beneath you was never solid to begin with. I was 32 years old. I had a career I'd built from nothing, a husband I thought I knew inside and out, and a plus sign on a pregnancy test that had made me cry happy tears in a Walgreens bathroom 3 weeks before. Life felt full, complete, the kind of complete that makes you almost afraid to breathe too hard in case it breaks. His name was Aaron. We'd met at a work conference in Nashville. He was in real estate development. I was a forensic auditor for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte. He had this way of listening to you like you were the only person in the room. Like every word you said mattered. I fell for it completely. We got married after 2 years of dating. Nothing extravagant, small ceremony in the backyard of my parents' house in Raleigh, about 40 people, my grandmother's white tablecloths on the folding tables, mason jars with sunflowers. Aaron cried when he saw me come down the steps in my dress. I have a photo of that moment on the dresser in our bedroom. I still don't know what to do with it. His family was different from mine. His father, I called him my father-in-law because that's what he was, though he never quite let me feel like family, was a man named Raymond who had made a significant amount of money in commercial real estate in the Carolinas over 40 years. He was 71, widowed, and he had one other son besides Aaron. My brother-in-law. His name was Curtis. And from the very first Thanksgiving dinner I sat through at that house, I understood that Curtis and his wife Nadine were the ones Raymond favored. I could feel it in every room. Curtis and Nadine had been trying to have a child for years. I knew this because Nadine brought it up constantly, at holiday dinners, at Sunday brunches, in sideways comments that managed to sound like compliments. "You're so lucky you're not going through what we're going through. I just hope someday I get to feel what you'll feel when it happens for you." There was an edge underneath every one of those sentences, thin and bright, like a paper cut you don't notice until you press something against it. Aaron's father had made it clear, in the particular way wealthy older men make things clear without ever saying them directly, that he expected grandchildren, that the family name meant something to him, that inheritance was something earned through continuation, not just blood. He'd updated his will twice in the last 3 years. Aaron told me this casually one night like it was just information, but I filed it away the way I file everything away, quietly, in a place where it stays. When I found out I was pregnant, Aaron seemed genuinely happy. He brought home flowers. He looked up stroller reviews at midnight. He called his dad before he called his own mother, which I noted but didn't say anything about. I told myself it was fine. I told myself everything was fine. I was about 9 weeks along when I started feeling off. Not just the nausea, which was considerable. I'm talking about a feeling I couldn't name. Aaron had started taking calls in other rooms. He'd started coming to bed after I was already asleep. Small things, the kind of things you can explain away individually but that accumulate into something you can't ignore. I was a forensic auditor. My entire career was built on finding what people tried to hide inside numbers. I knew better than most that the details that seem insignificant are usually the ones that matter most. One Thursday evening in February, I came home from the office early because I had a headache that had been sitting behind my left eye since noon. I took off my coat in the hallway, set my bag down on the bench by the door, and heard Aaron's voice coming from his home office at the end of the hall. The door wasn't fully closed. He was on the phone, and something in his tone, low, tight, the voice he used when he was managing a situation, made me stop. I stood very still. "She doesn't know anything," he said. "She won't." A pause. "Curtis, I'm telling you it's going to work. Just let me handle my end." Another pause, longer. "One of them, yeah, the girl. If there's a girl. It doesn't matter. Whatever the doctor says, we use Dr. Farrow. He's done this before. He knows how to handle the paperwork." I don't fully remember the next few seconds. I know I didn't move. I know the headache disappeared completely, replaced by a stillness that felt like my body had decided thinking was more important than feeling. I pressed my back against the hallway wall and listened to the rest of that call. What I pieced together standing there in my coat with my heart somewhere near my feet was this. I was likely carrying more than one baby, something Aaron apparently already knew because he had access to my OB's office through a mutual contact, a fact that sent a layer of cold through me I still can't fully describe. Curtis and Nadine couldn't conceive. Raymond's will had a clause, informal, verbal, the kind that gets enforced through control rather than courts, that the son who provided a biological heir would receive the majority of a substantial estate. Aaron had worked out an arrangement with a doctor named Pharaoh to falsify birth records and hand one of my children to Curtis and Nadine as their own. He was going to tell me one of our babies was stillborn. I walked into the kitchen. I filled a glass of water. I drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the backyard where the bird feeder Aaron had hung was swaying in the wind. I thought about every piece of paper I had ever untangled in my career. Every trail of numbers that looked clean until it didn't. Every person who thought they had hidden something perfectly and hadn't. I did not cry. Not yet. I called my OB the next morning, claiming I wanted to update my emergency contact. In the process, I asked casually whether anyone else on Aaron's behalf had requested information about my records. The nurse hesitated just long enough. I thanked her and hung up. I took the day off work, which I never do, and drove to a medical center 2 towns over where no one knew me. I paid out of pocket for an ultrasound. I lay on that table and watched the screen, and the technician said quietly and warmly, "Looks like you've got 2 in there, both looking healthy. Twin girls." I drove home with that information folded inside me like a document I wasn't ready to open all the way. I made dinner. I set the table. When Aaron came home, I kissed him hello and asked how his day was and sat across from him while he talked about a property deal in Mecklenburg County, and I smiled at the right times. That night, after he fell asleep, I got up. I went to his office. I moved slowly and without turning on the overhead light, using only the glow of my phone screen. I knew where he kept his important files, not because I'd snooped before, but because I'm observant in the way that people who have spent years reading financial documents tend to be observant. I know what organized deception looks like. I found a folder behind his hanging files. Inside were printed emails between Aaron and a Dr. Pharaoh, whose name I cross-referenced on my phone while standing there in the dark. Dr. Pharaoh was an OB with a practice in a suburb of Greensboro who had lost his hospital admitting privileges 2 years earlier for reasons that were listed in a state medical board document as domiciliation irregularities. There were also messages between Aaron and Curtis. They were not subtle. They laid out the plan with the kind of confidence that people have when they believe they are completely safe. I photographed every page with my phone. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Then I went back to bed and lay next to my husband in the dark and stared at the ceiling until morning. I was 19 weeks along when I finally had everything I needed. I want to be clear about why it took that long. Not because I was afraid, though I was, and not because I didn't have enough to act on earlier, because I did. I waited because I am methodical. I waited because I knew that if I moved too fast, they would close ranks, and I would end up with nothing except a ruined marriage and a missing child. I'd seen what happened in custody cases, in fraud cases, when someone acted on instinct rather than evidence. I was not going to be that person. In those weeks, I did several things very carefully. I opened a separate checking account at a credit union in a town 40 minutes away. I deposited money into it over time, not large amounts, nothing that would trigger a joint account alert, just steady transfers that were easy to explain as expense reimbursements from work. I contacted a family law attorney named Ms. Whitmore, a woman who had a reputation in the Charlotte legal community for being methodical and merciless, which were exactly the qualities I needed, and I met with her twice during my lunch breaks without telling anyone. I brought copies of everything I'd found. I also, and this was the hardest part, called my mother. My mother is not a dramatic woman. She raised me and my younger sister after my father left when I was 9, worked as a bookkeeper for 30 years, and has a quality I've always admired and slightly feared. She does not panic, she problem solves. When I told her what was happening, there was a long silence on the phone, and then she said, "Tell me what you need from me and I'll be there." She drove up from Raleigh the following weekend under the cover of a routine visit and spent 2 days helping me organize my documents and move certain things out of the house to a storage unit we rented in her name. My sister came too. She's a nurse, sharp and practical, and she came with me to a second opinion appointment at a hospital in Concord, where neither Aaron nor Dr. Pharaoh had any connections. I established care there under my maiden name, which was still legally valid as an alternate ID. My sister sat in the room with me and held my hand when the doctor confirmed that both girls were healthy and exactly where they should be. I did not tell Aaron any of this. I want to say something here because I've been asked this question more than once by people who know the story. Pack a bag, walk out, go to my mother's house and file for divorce from a safe distance. The answer is that I could not ensure my children's safety from a distance, as long as Aaron and Curtis and Dr. Pharaoh had an open window and a plan in motion. Leaving did not make my daughters safe. It just made me less able to see what was happening. If I left, they would adjust the plan. They would find another way, and I would not be there to stop it. So I stayed. I watched. I documented. Aaron booked my delivery at a hospital in Greensboro, supposedly because it had a better NICU, which, if you wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, might sound reasonable. Except I looked up the NICU ratings and they were not better than the hospital where I had established alternative care. They were, however, in the same network as Dr. Farrow's practice. I added this to my file. At 26 weeks, I made the call I had been building towards since February. I had a contact from a financial fraud case 3 years earlier, a former colleague who had moved to the FBI's white-collar crime division in Charlotte. I reached out to him through a personal email and asked if we could meet off the record. He met me at a coffee shop near my office. I brought a flash drive and a printed summary that Ms. Whitmore had helped me organize. I walked him through everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "This isn't just fraud. What they're describing, falsifying birth records, transferring a child without the mother's consent, that's federal. Interstate if Pharaoh's license crosses state lines, which it looks like it does." He took the flash drive. The next 6 weeks were the longest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner with Aaron and responded to his suggestions about baby names and assembled a crib in the nursery with him on a Sunday afternoon, while something in me watched it all from a strange, removed distance. He had no idea. He was attentive and warm and completely certain that everything was going according to plan. My mother called me every evening. We talked about ordinary things, what she'd made for dinner, whether my sister's car was making a sound again, the hydrangeas in her backyard that were finally coming back. It helped to talk about ordinary things. At 32 weeks, Miss Whitmore filed a protective motion under seal. My care was formally transferred to the hospital in Concord. I had a letter from my OB there that documented my established care and the medical necessity of continuity. Aaron didn't find out until 2 days before my scheduled delivery date when he called the Greensboro hospital to confirm arrangements and was told my records were not in their system. He came home that evening and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and my hands very still in my lap. The look on his face is something I think about sometimes, not with satisfaction exactly, more with a kind of grief for everything I had thought was real. "What did you do?" he said. "I protected my daughters," I said. He reached for his phone. I watched him call Curtis. I watched him call a number I didn't recognize, which later turned out to be Dr. Farrow. By the time he was making the third call, there were 2 vehicles parked on our street that had not been there an hour before. The agents came to the door at 7:14 in the evening. I had unlocked the deadbolt earlier so I wouldn't have to get up. Aaron was arrested in our kitchen. Curtis was picked up at his home in Concord. Dr. Farrow was arrested at his practice. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of vital records, and, because of the interstate elements involving Dr. Farrow's multi-state license, federal conspiracy. Nadine was not charged, though she was interviewed extensively. Ms. Whitmore later told me the investigators believed she was aware of the plan, but the evidence of her direct participation wasn't solid enough to charge. I have opinions about that. I keep them to myself. Raymond was never charged. He denied knowing the details of the arrangement, and there was no documentation connecting him directly. Aaron, in a moment of clarity that I think was mostly self-serving, told investigators that his father's inheritance structure had created a pressure he'd acted on without his father's knowledge. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what Raymond knew. I don't think I'll ever ask. My daughters were born on a Wednesday morning in April, 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and 6 pounds even. The room was bright, and my sister was there and my mother was there, and they were loud and red-faced and absolutely, completely real. I named them myself. I had not shared the names I was considering with anyone during those last weeks. Not because I was superstitious, but because those names felt like the one thing I was keeping entirely for myself until I was ready. I called them Nadia and June. I sat in the hospital room that evening with one of them on each side of me, their small weights pressed against my ribs, and I cried for the first time in months. Not because things had been hard, though they had been. Not because I was angry, though I was that too, and would be for a long time. I cried because they were here. Because the plan had failed completely and they were here and they were mine. Aaron's trial took 14 months. He was convicted on 3 counts and sentenced to federal prison. Curtis took a plea agreement. Dr. Farrow's license was permanently revoked, and he received a sentence of 4 years. The civil proceedings that followed the criminal case resulted in a financial settlement that Raymond's attorneys negotiated on the family's behalf. I'll keep the specifics private, but it was enough to ensure that Nadia and June will have options I didn't have at their age. I moved back to Raleigh 8 months after the girls were born. My mother has a house with a yard and a spare room that became 2 small rooms with some creative renovation work that my sister's boyfriend helped with on weekends. We have dinner together most nights. My mother reads to the girls before bed. My sister has declared herself their primary aunt with the confidence of someone who has never been challenged on anything. There are things I still process. I think I will for a long time. The marriage I thought I had. The family I thought Aaron was. The ease with which the people closest to him were willing to treat a human life, 2 human lives, as instruments of inheritance. But I also know this: the skills I spent years building in a career that most people find dry and impenetrable, the patience to follow a trail, the discipline to document rather than react, the ability to stay calm when everything in me wanted to scream. Those skills are the reason my daughters are asleep down the hall right now. That's not a small thing. That's everything. The wooden rocking chair I bought at a second-hand shop in Charlotte came with us to Raleigh. It's in the corner of the room the girls share, between the 2 cribs. Some nights when they wake up and I carry one of them out of sleep into the lamplit quiet, I sit in that chair and hold her while the house settles around us, and I think about how close it all came to being different. And then Nadia makes a sound in her sleep, or June grabs my finger with her whole fist and the thought dissolves. They're here. We're safe. That's where the story ends, and where everything else begins.